In ES 2022, new feature was introduced called Static Initialization Blocks. With Static Initialization Blocks, we can initialize static variables and execute some code only once when the class is loaded. In this video, you will learn what Static Initialization Blocks are, why to use them, and how to use them. So, let's get started. Before diving into the details of static initialization blocks, let's understand the static variable and what is the difference between static and instance variables. Static variables are variables that are shared by all instances of a class. They are declared with the static keyword. Static variables are initialized when the class is loaded. Let's try to understand the difference between static and instance variables with the help of an example. I have created a class named myClass. It has two properties, one is static and another is an instance property. Let's create two instances of myClass and compare the value of the properties. If we compare the values of the static prop, we get true as the output. This is because the static prop is shared by all instances of the class. But if we compare the values of the instance prop, we get false as the output. This is because the instance prop is not shared by all instances of the class. Now we know what is static variable and the difference between static and instance variables. Let's understand the static initialization block. Static initialization blocks are a special feature of a class that enable more flexible initialization of static properties than can be achieved using per-field initialization. Static blocks allow statements to be evaluated during the initialization of a class. Let's see an example. To define a static initialization block, we can use the static keyword followed by a block. Inside the block, we can initialize static variables and execute some code only once when the class is loaded. If we run the code, we will get the log message static initialization block in the console and the static prop will be initialized with an empty object. Our example works like before, but this time we achieved using a static initialization block. Why use static initialization blocks? Sometimes we want to initialize static variables conditionally or execute some code only once like database connection, etc. In such cases, we can use static initialization blocks. Let's assume that we have a function createDBConnection which is responsible for creating a database connection. If we create a database connection in the constructor, for every instance of the class, we will create a new connection. Which is not a good practice, because one class can have multiple instances and we might end up creating thousands of connections. To solve this problem, we can use static initialization blocks to create a connection, since it will execute only once when the class is loaded. If we run the code again, we will get only one log message in the console. This way we can get rid of creating many connections. Now we know what static initialization blocks are, why to use them, and how to use them. Few more things you should know about static initialization blocks. 1. A class can have any number of static initialization blocks in its class body. These are evaluated in the order they are declared. Static initialization blocks will be executed from top to bottom. If we run this code we will get block 1 and block 2 in the console. 2. They are called before the constructor. Static initialization blocks will be executed before the constructor, because the constructor is called when we create an instance of the class. If we run this code, we will get block and constructor in the console. 3. They are called before the constructor of the base class. Let's say we have a class base connection and another class connection that extends base connection and we have a static initialization block in both classes. If we create an instance of the connection class and then run this code, the execution order will be 1. Base connection static initialization block. 2. Connection static initialization block. 3. Base connection constructor. 4. Connection constructor. Sometimes it is difficult to understand the execution order of static initialization blocks. Let's see another example. If I create an instance of the base connection class instead of the connection class, what will be the execution order? Pause the video, and try to think of the execution order. 1. Base connection static initialization block. 2. Connection static initialization block. 3. Base connection constructor. As you can see, the static initialization block of the derived class is executed even if we create an instance of the base class. This is because the static initialization block of the derived class is executed before the constructor of the derived class. Always remember, static initialization blocks are executed only once when the class is loaded. No matter whether you are using the class or not, the static initialization block will be executed. Let me repeat this again. Static initialization blocks are executed only once when the class is loaded. No matter whether you are using the class or not, the static initialization block will be executed. This is all for this video, guys. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments section. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. If you did, please consider liking and sharing it with your friends and subscribing to my channel. This will help me create more content like this in the future and allow more people to benefit from it. I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Until then, happy coding.